From the Middle is proud to be a founding member of the Odd Pods Media Network.
Oh, for the love.
Sorry, just clearing my Mountain Dew hole.
I got my phone hole cleaned today.
That's where you keep it?
You're so cerebral and you're so developed and evolved. From the Middle after dark over here.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 102 of From the Middle. From the Middle, if you're joining us for the first time, is a comedy, culture, entertainment, and interview style podcast. We are three middle-class guys living in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives, with a point of view that usually falls somewhere in the middle. It's usually just the three of us, but on average, once a month, we have a guest, and I am very excited to introduce Patrick Mettle, mental health counselor. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, guys. Great to be with you tonight.
We've made it a habit of ours to poke fun. We've successfully and tactfully, using the word tactfully quite loosely, goofed off at many a serious topic, and today is a time when we get a run for our money. So
Okay.
we'll see how this goes.
So by way of context and a little bit of introduction, so I am proud to admit that Patrick is my counselor. Dylan and I's dad works at the Recovery Center in Lancaster, Ohio. That is an outpatient behavioral health treatment center. They deal with mental health and addiction issues. And Dad kind of keeps tabs on client and stakeholder feedback. And I had mentioned to my dad that I was interested in talking to somebody and said, give me the top name on that list. And so many people had such wonderful things to say about Patrick that I gave Open Arms Counseling a ring. And so Patrick, you've helped a lot of folks based on the records that my dad's keeping. So it means a lot that you're willing to join us, and excited to dig into mental health today and a little more about you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm glad your dad got the check that I sent him. So it's paying off big time.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself. Just introduce yourself to our listeners and in as much as you want to.
Yeah. So, I started on this journey. It was probably about 10 years ago. And this is a second career for me. I was in the restaurant industry for about 23 years, joined the military after high school, and had a series of life events that, really kind of set me back, but also allowed me to kind of focus on really what I wanted to do with this second part of my life. Went through a divorce, battled through alcoholism, and lost a son in 2010. And, I firmly believe that life experiences can be our greatest asset moving forward. And I really felt called to get into the field of counseling or working with individuals. And, I didn't know what it looked like at first, but, I had no college education at all. So in 2011, I started on that journey to first get that bachelor's degree and starting to take some college classes. And then I was accepted into Ashland Theological Seminary in 2014. And I started counseling in 2016. And currently I hold the title of clinical director at Open Arms Counseling, and supervise 10 other up and coming counselors as well. So it's just really been a blessing for me to be able to work with individuals like Corey and many other folks, but also to be able to nurture these younger folks that are coming up through the ranks as well. So like I said, it's a tremendous blessing for me.
I would imagine that starting that path is uncommon later in life. Did you find that to be true, or did that feel daunting when you were like, wow, that's still a lot of school that I need to that I need to tackle? And
Well, it was interesting because I was speaking with a pastor friend of mine when I was finishing up my undergrad, and my undergrad is in Christian ministry and leadership. And I said, hey, I'm really thinking about going to grad school and becoming a counselor. And he's like, you're going to be almost 50 when you graduate. And I'm like, well, I plan on being 50, man, regardless.
yeah,
So I'd like to think I have some good years left. And I ended up speaking with another pastor friend of mine, and he said, look, it sounds great. You probably got a good 25 years that you can do this career
yeah.
well into your 70s. So yeah, it took a little bit of encouragement for sure. But the funny thing was, I was probably the third oldest. So there was a couple people that were above me, but yeah, most of the students were in their mid 20s. So it was definitely a culture shock for me.
Well, good for you for doing that. I know Sherry's dad, when Sherry's mom passed away from pancreatic cancer, right as as Sherry was headed to college. Sherry's parents were lifelong farmers, but her dad had this dream of being a pastor, and he was already 40s, late 40s or early 50s. And he's like, I've always had this dream. My wife has now passed. I'm just going to go pursue this dream. And a lot of people thought he was crazy, but he was like exactly what you just said. Once I'm all said and done after 7 or so years of school, I've got a lot of good years left in me, and I don't want to let
Absolutely.
that dream die. And I believe I can be a help to people. And so I always thought that was really cool. And we graduated. My father-in-law and I graduated undergrad at the same time, and then he went on to seminary. So good for you, man. I think that's really awesome. And I know, like, 70 or not, you've already helped me a ton. And so I know you're helping a lot of other people already. So it's already worth it.
The interesting thing about that, Corey, too, is, and I don't know about you guys, and you can speak on this, but I remember being in my 20s, early 20s, and it was really about, you had a lot of people in your ear back then, whether it's your parents or grandparents or family and friends, and they're kind of pushing you in a certain direction. And they're also telling you, hey, don't do that. That could be a dead end, or you're not going to do well in that. And I say, screw all that. Go after what you're passionate about. What's your dream? What's your dream job? And I know sometimes it's hard being 20 something and really knowing the answer to that. But, I felt like in my life anyway, that I spent a lot of time, chasing money or chasing security and not really going after my passion. And what I found is, now that I work in a field that I'm passionate about, it's almost effortless
Yeah.
a lot of times. Yeah.
I think you've listened to some of our previous episodes, because that's definitely a theme with a lot of the guests that we've had, those that chose to follow that passion. So awesome. So maybe talk a little bit about mental health today in general. Like, you've just, recently entered into this field. You've probably seen a lot in the last handful of years, especially how COVID-19 in the last 14 months has revealed. I like to think, or my working hypothesis is, that there are a lot of folks like myself who may have had, mild anxiety or mild depression, but COVID-19 really revealed it, because they had a pressure release valve before. They could go out with friends, or they could, go shopping, or they could mask their, right on the fringe of mental health challenges with a shopping spree or whatever. And then when that goes away and you're, restricted to your house for a year, that changes a lot. So I'm getting ahead of myself and leading the witness. So talk a little bit, just mental health in general, and then how things have really changed in the last 14 months.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, Corey, with the COVID-19 is we're seeing this, and there's been a lot of research about this, especially we see it with trauma a lot. A lot of this is boils down to kind of what you were made up of before COVID, right? So we think about people that are at risk for not handling COVID well. And those are the folks that are, kind of on the fringe, or maybe have inherited some genes that would make them more susceptible to a mental illness. And then you throw that, basically, let's call COVID an accelerator, right? You throw that onto it, and, you're going to see those mood and anxiety disorders really come out and manifest themselves in a lot of different ways. And I can tell you, in the last 14 months, our patient load has literally tripled in 14 months. We can't keep enough therapists on right now to handle what we would, our goal is to, hey, you call on Monday, we want to see you that week. And we've got several of our therapists now that are on 1, 2, 3 week waiting lists. So I think we're just beginning really to see the lasting effects of COVID. I think this is going to go on for a year or two more, if not longer.
Has that helped, do you think, we know there's a stigma around mental health. I mean, even mentioning it, having a guest on your podcast to talk about it, makes a certain subset of the population a little cringy. But do you think that people are more aware now than ever before, or more willing to talk about it, or that accelerator that you talked about revealed itself in a way in either themselves or a friend or family member that they were like, that maybe changed or broke down some of those walls?
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I think, one of the things that I've seen even before the pandemic was you see the younger population, the college age, I guess we call them millennials, right? That they're a lot more accepting of mental health, and they're more willing to reach out for help. But what we've seen now are a lot more of those 50 and 40 somethings reaching out since this pandemic. So yeah, I think it has loosened it up somewhat. On the other hand, I think there's still a good sizable population that would still think that mental health is something that can be helped. You know what I mean? Like, you're choosing to be depressed, or you're choosing to be anxious.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you say that, because there's a lot of these kind of like generational jabs that go back and forth on social media, and sort of the millennial or Gen Z being the younger kind of can't handle the world. A lot of those memes kind of go around, and the surface level, they're meant to be funny. I try not to partake in that at all, but it feels like what you said is really the answer to those. It's that a younger generation is more open to talking to somebody, not that they have less issues or don't handle issues as well as maybe older generations who are less likely. Am I hearing you correctly in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what I see, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, is, we think of something that is significant for you may be insignificant for me, and vice versa. And I think that there's a generation. So you look at my parents who are in their late 70s, right? You don't talk about that stuff, right? And now we're getting into generations now where people are at least willing to talk about it. And I think that for such a long time, it was, you're thinking of the straight jackets and the rubber rooms and all that stuff, and not really looking at, the things that are going on in our society and our world. And I think that with information being so available now as well, it's harder for kids growing up as teenagers than it was 30, 40 years ago. You know, if we were born in the early 1900s and our family was a farming family, you knew what you were going to do, right? We didn't have a cell phone that would give me all the information in the world. So nowadays, kids are just being inundated with all this information, all this stuff. In a way, it's a good thing because it's allowing them to ask questions and be more open-minded, but it's a lot to process for a young mind, and and I feel like it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What about,
Yeah.
I think, specifically for people who might be a little older than, let's say, sort of very early onsetters of millennials. So myself was born in 1984.
Okay.
So say people in their mid 30s to their 40s, they kind of sit sort of in between those two camps, right? And
Yeah.
And one theory that I kind of have that I want to ask you about is, when it comes to mental health, my wife deals with some mental health problems that we've been, at least within our church, very public about. We've talked about that, and even here in this podcast, like she has given me the green light. Like, we want to share this story with people. That's what we want to use it for. But what I know that she has felt, that she has perceived that stigma. But when it came time for her and us as a family to kind of open up and say, this is what we've been going through these past years, was met with nothing but support from family members that we weren't necessarily expecting it from our church. Nothing but support there. And so there's this thought that I have that it seems like a tall task to ask people who already potentially deal with something like anxiety, already deal with things that are already kind of busting their self-esteem, and then and that just even that perception of a stigma could be enough, that stigma has exist. And so now I'm so afraid of it. Even if I come out and there's a support system there, if I come out, but there's still this, and that's what I think is the ugly part, that the thing that keeps you from getting the help, keeps you from talking about it. So what are your, I don't know, what are your thoughts or advice for people in that age group?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you bring up a legitimate concern, but you really hit on the crux of therapy, I think, because a lot of what I do with folks is we examine those kind of thoughts and find the truth in them. What is, I practice, my theoretical approach is what's called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the things that we use in DBT is called the wise mind. So if you think of 3 circles, right, or 2 circles, and they overlap. So you've got one side is emotions, the other side is logic, and then in between you have the wise mind. So one thing I'll ask my clients is that an emotional response or is that a logical response? Because I think with perception and logic are 2 different things, right? I can feel like you're judging me right now, but I don't know that for sure.
Right.
So one of the things that we try to do in the therapy sessions is we try to debunk that, kind of look at it and say, okay, what's the evidence that you have that would support that you're being judged or you're being stigmatized? One of the things that gets us in trouble a lot, I think, is, that assumption that whether, something bad's going to happen to me, or this person is judging me. And really, I go through and say, okay, so tell me what proof you have of that. I don't want you to think about your emotions and how you feel. I want you to just give me the facts of why you think you're being judged or you're being stigmatized. Can you think of any? And then I want you to go turn around and we're going to say, okay, can you give me reasons why you don't think you're being stigmatized? Is there evidence to support the other side of that? And, I would say in this case, Kendall, what you talked about, it sounds like that there's a lot of facts that would support the opposite of that, where, you were able to have folks in your church family and in your family that are supportive. So, again, thinking of what we call a reframe of a thought and say, no, I do have people that support me, who love me, who care about, what I have going on in my life, and learning how to basically look at it a different way. So, and sometimes it takes, being able to tell yourself that over and over again. But it's something that we rarely practice, right? Because when we have that negative thought and that negative feeling, that counts for so much more than a positive thought and feeling, right? Nobody wants to feel, stigmatized or left out or anything like that. And it's the adage I use is, you take a test in school and there's 10 answers and you get a 90. Well, the first thing you say is, which one did I miss? Not celebrate the 9 you got right. And that's kind of what, I try to do. It's like, look, you got 9 out of 10 right. That's great. But we want to just hone in on that one, that one person or that one mistake. And that, for whatever reason, human condition, whatever you want to call it, that's what we focus on. So really, it's learning to examine the thoughts and then reframing it into something. It doesn't even have to be positive, just more helpful, right? It can be more balanced, more neutral than anything. So, giving clients homework and having them practice it in session is really helpful. And, it's like anything you do, the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. And I talk to folks a lot about, especially if they're spiritual people. I hope that when you're praying to the Lord every night, that you're practicing gratitude. You're telling God what you're grateful for each day, and don't hold back. I feel blessed that I have a house to live in, a car to drive, a job to go to, food on the table, things like that, let alone, relationships and just all that stuff. So, training my brain essentially to look at things from a positive side than focusing in on the negative.
I'll just double down on that wise mind thing. And that, like, when you had first talked to me about that, Patrick, there was a specific moment that it was pretty dark. And you said, like, what's the worst possible thing you can, like, what's your biggest fear in this moment? And I listed the big, ugly, nasty, scary thought. And then you did is there any evidence to support it? And I couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence to support the contrary or the antithesis of that? There was a ton. And then you said, so based on that, how might you reframe it? I'm so susceptible to emotion overtaking me in that moment. But when you when you let the wave pass and you're able to like grab onto those truths that deep down at a guttural level, and then use those as the pillars from which to reframe it. But like you said, it's you got to practice. It's like working out. Like, you got to work out. That's a new muscle for many, because it sounds like on the surface, and I know you're not saying it is, just reframe it.
Yeah, it's so simple, right?
But it's about breaking it apart. And I think that's the practice, that 4-step process. Super helpful.
Yeah, and typically, I like to do something like that with folks, like in a journaling prompt. It's kind of like, okay, we're gonna go through the day. What was something that was really difficult that day, and go through that from a journaling standpoint, and again, getting people into the habit, because look, I know it in the moment, especially if it's something really heated. You need to be at least a brown belt in that.
Yeah.
Because I get the emotions get the best of me as well, and I know it obviously just as well as anybody. So
Sure. That's good.
I'd love to pivot there if Corey and Kendall don't have any other follow-up questions.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about millennials and Gen Z being a little more open to the counseling process, mental health, talking about mental health issues. So with that in mind, these are also the people who are the new wave of business owners, corporate executives, C-suite. And now we have a whole generation of people much more open to these topics and discussing them. And they're kind of becoming these corporate-y buzzwords too. And talking about employee mental health and mental health days and, unlimited time off so people can get whatever. So if anyone follows like kind of the LinkedIn community at all, or any of those business discussions, I always find that fascinating, because you'll never really know if this is if these are things that these people and companies genuinely are excited about focusing on for their employees, or if it's just the buzzword and if it's just the thing they're supposed to say to attract talent. I was curious if you had any thoughts. That's such a big open-ended thing. But I was curious if you had any thoughts on that sort of trend of companies and executives and C-suite embracing this whole idea of talking more about mental health and mental health days. What are they getting right or wrong from your point of view? Anything you want to share in that? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what they're getting right is bringing it to the table and opening it up for discussion. I think it's important to do that. Now, where I question some of it is, okay, so if we're going to focus on employee wellness, which I think a lot of companies been doing this for a while. It was more of a physical health thing, more so than mental health, but they're so connected to each other. So it's great that they're expanding those kind of things. My thought, though, is I would challenge some of these businesses and corporations to have someone who puts together a program or a plan that your employees can follow to help with this mental health. It's like, okay, let's, and I was going to talk about this tonight, actually, with you guys, because I wanted to give everyone out there an opportunity to take a nugget that they can use for themselves. So maybe this is a good time to segue into that. But, Corey and I actually did work on this. And Corey, what I'm talking about is that healthy whole self wellness plan that we talked about. So I'll explain it to everybody. But so if you think of, 4 boxes kind of lined up with each other, you've got physical health, you have emotional health, you have spiritual health, and you have social health. And my philosophy is, if you're doing well in those 4 areas, your overall wellness is going to be pretty good, and I can put anything into one of those boxes. If you want to make more money and that makes you happy, hey, put it into your emotional health box. And the other thing is, they're all kind of tied in together, right? They affect each other. So, I'd like to see a company, kind of do something like that, more structure, instead of, Yeah, just take off all the time you need. Well, if I'm really majorly depressed, I may take 4 days off and never get off my couch, and drink 4 bottles of booze, that I don't know what good that's doing me,
Mhm.
so having a plan in place. But yeah, so with this wellness plan, what I'm looking at here, if we go to the physical box, right? So we're talking about something that enhances your health physically. So maybe it's diet and exercise, maybe it's just going for a walk 2 or 3 times a week or something like that. But um, I encourage all my clients to have what we call SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound goals. So, going for a walk for an hour 3 times a week is a pretty good SMART goal for somebody like me. Now, if I said I was going to run 5 miles 7 days a week, you would laugh at me. And hopefully I would be running towards Mount Carmel, which I live on the east side. So it'd be a lot shorter for the ambulance to pick me up and take me to the ER if I tried to do that. So definitely more realistic in there. And it could be just, healthy eating habits would be a good physical goal.
Mm.
There's a lot of things you can put in there. The emotional side is, if you think about it, what makes you happy, right? What are some of the things that soup up your emotions? For me, I love comedians. I love Star Wars, Star Trek. Uh, I'm watching binge watching Community, or not Community, but Superstore right now. It's a pretty good
Mm.
show. It's no Parks and Rec, but we could talk about that later. But it's also activities too. A good uh, think of ways to use your 5 senses. I always recommend cooking. That's a great one. You get to touch the ingredients, you get to smell, you get to taste, you get to see your creation. What a great way to do a new recipe 2 or 3 times a way. And you notice some of these things I'm talking about, you could do them during COVID too, right? And this is one of the things that I really pushed hard on my clients that were dealing with some of that COVID, stuff. But definitely wellness for anybody right now. Spiritual side, obviously we're all followers of Christ here. So, is it joining a Bible study, or maybe finding some kind of men's fellowship or something like that above and beyond, Sunday service. Maybe you're going to commit to reading. One of the things I did is I committed to reading the 4 Gospels for a year, just continuously, on top of my normal reading. But it's really great, really fruitful. For some folks, that aren't religious, I recommend meditation or yoga, something that brings some inward peace to you. And then lastly, the social aspect. And here is the number one thing I believe that really affects most of the people that have mood and anxiety disorders. That social aspect is lacking. Finding authentic friendships, people that you can talk to, that not just on the surface, but to really have deep conversations with. And being able to connect with people, whether it be via a Zoom call. And now things are starting to open up. So, hey, we can get back together, come over to the house, have a barbecue, that kind of thing. But, that social connection. So you can see where, if you could, let's say you've got friends that you like to go bike riding with. So you got a physical and a social and definitely an emotional thing, because you get to be out in nature and everything's in bloom right now. So, I would say to anybody out there, check those 4 areas and see where you're at. Maybe set a goal for each one of those for the summer.
Yeah, I love that too, because I think sometimes, regardless of the size of company where somebody works, that's where a lot of people hear about, hey, we have an EAP or employee assistance program. And like that feels so murky. Like you don't even know what that means. It feels like I'm
Right.
supposed to go talk to my HR person. They just handed me a number because my medical carrier has some kind of number I can call. It feels so
Yeah.
detached. And I think people want to try, just like like give me something I can just try. Give me, and so I love the really practical, like it's something that people can say, okay, that's a very simple list. Those are some things that I enjoy. I can try some of those things instead of just this number I'm just supposed to call to some random person.
Right. And the crazy thing about that, Dylan, too, is most of the EAP folks that come to our office, it's like, hey, I've got 4 sessions, from my EAP. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no pressure. Right. I got to change your life for the better in 4 hours.
Yeah. And I'm with Dylan. I love the practicality of that. So one more time, Patrick, before we take a break, we'll give people a minute to draw that quadrant and list those buckets. So what were those again?
Yeah. So we've got the first quarter there is physical, and then the second one is emotional, spiritual, and then the last one is social.
Awesome.
And right down the middle, healthy whole self.
Awesome. That's perfect. We're going to take a quick break and hear a word from one of our friends in the Odd Pods Media Network, and we'll be right back with Patrick Mettle.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm Richie.
And I'm Little Matt.
And here at the 500 Section Lounge, we have a few requirements. First, you've got to be able to talk about anything at all. Secondly, you need to be able to laugh, play games, and talk to some very interesting people.
From sports radio personalities to reality television contest finalists and everything in between, we talk to them all.
Yeah, it's all right here in the lounge. So be on the lookout for what we do next.
And always be there to
grab a listen.
And we're back with Patrick Mettle. We were just talking a little bit about Mulan, and I think we're going to get into that next episode. But just as a fun departure, Patrick, share with us some of you already mentioned a few of them, but what are some of the fandoms that you are big into? You said Star Wars, you said Star Trek. You got me hooked on Letterkenny. So we've been watching that together. What else?
I'll be honest, though. I'm a big Trailer Park Boys fan.
Oh, yeah.
and the big question, guys, is, and I talked to you about Kim's Convenience. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. It is a fantastic show. But here's the thing. They just finished up their last season, and Schitt's Creek just finished up. So the buzz is, what's going to be the next big Canadian sitcom?
Ah, fun. You fit right in, Patrick. This is perfect.
This is great. I've barely watched Kim's Convenience. I did like it, but my wife and I love Schitt's Creek. It took a minute for me to kind of warm up to the characters, is probably the way to put it. And then eventually, once you realize, oh, these aren't just like rich elitists, they actually are kind people that they really, then they grow on you really quick. Once
absolutely.
You show. But I've heard a lot of that, like, I tried part of season 1, and it's like, just keep watching Schitt's Creek.
Right.
It's so good.
I am a huge Chris Elliott fan too. I don't know, you guys may not remember, he was in this show on Fox back in, it was probably early 90s, late 80s, but it was called Get a Life. And he was this 30-year-old paper boy that lived home. And it was the dumbest show you've ever seen, but it was so funny.
That's great.
And his dad played his real dad in the show, Bob Elliott, who was a pretty famous comedian way back in the 50s and 60s.
So I have to ask, because I rarely get another Star Trek fan on here. Do you have favorite series or movies?
I'm definitely original Star Trek.
Okay.
Is my favorite. I definitely can watch Next Generation, though. I mean, my favorite movie, and I think the best one to me, is the one where they save the whales.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Wrath of Khan was unbelievably good, which, by the way, here, spoiler for who has never seen this, in the original episode or the original series, Khan never meets Chekhov. Chekhov wasn't on the show yet, but he claims to have known him in Wrath of Khan. Just fun fact.
Yeah, I certainly didn't know that.
Yeah.
And
I specifically watched that episode to look for Chekhov, and he was not on there.
that's awesome. It's funny too because nobody needs to remember which movie it was. If you just say the whale one, everyone goes, "Yep, got it."
Voyage Home.
Totally remember. Yep, whale movie.
Yeah, just it's just so funny to see them, in modern day San Francisco, and it's just a lot of it's probably one of the funniest ones for sure. I think that's why I'm attracted to it so much, because I still cry every time Spock dies. And I've seen that movie, I don't know, 30, 40 times. It's like, man.
I think that was a good movie, sort of wetting my whistle for what it would be like for a show called, I forget what they call the training grounds for the Federation, but like a cadets type show.
Oh, yeah.
I think that sort of gives you an idea what it would be like if there was a show that took place in the future in San Francisco. You see a lot of them going on missions and back, but they're mostly on Earth. That's what that always kind of makes me long for. Like, I want to see a show that takes place mostly on Earth, but they're training and they do quick missions.
Right. Yeah. Just warp out for a couple days, come back or whatever.
Yeah, little arcs where they're gone, but they still have to come back. Sorry, whole tangent.
I love this. In some of our
No, that's great.
This is perfect, because in some of our email exchanges leading up to this episode, Patrick replied with, "I'll bring my A game." And not only did he bring his mental health A game, but he brought his geek culture A game by doing extra Star Trek research. I love it, man. You're like the perfect guest. It's awesome.
It's unbelievable. I don't know why I think of these things, but
and do you have any favorite Star Wars films outside of the original trilogy? Because everyone's always going to say the original trilogy first.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed Rogue One, for sure. Solo, not so much, even though I am a huge Donald Glover fan. I really love The Mandalorian, and I'm really psyched about the Boba Fett series that's going to be coming up too. I think that's going to be cool.
Yeah, if you're a Mandalorian fan, we're going to be real spoiled with season 3 plus the Book of Fett.
Yeah.
We're getting all kinds of goodies later this year and early next year. That's going to be fantastic.
Yes, for sure. Now, I got to say, though, guys, I am probably more than anything, huge Marvel guy. Love the Marvel universe. Yeah.
You don't fit in here at all.
I am so stoked for Loki.
Oh, yeah. I think I've referenced at least a dozen times in the episodes just from 2021 this year how Disney Plus is going to just keep delivering Marvel and Star Wars all year long, and how excited I am about it.
Yeah, why not?
Like, just show after show. We got WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We're getting Loki. We're getting What If.
Yeah.
There's going to be more, plus movies and Shang-Chi and Black Widow. Yeah, it's just what a fun year. We're going to get to see all kinds of cool content.
So the Shang-Chi guy he's the son in Kim's Convenience.
Yeah. I hadn't made that connection.
He is. Yes.
I'm going to have to watch Kim's Convenience now.
I'm telling you, it all circles back.
Beautiful.
Our loyal listeners are now realizing that I mostly pay Patrick just to have these conversations to fill my social bucket. He's not actually my counselor.
Yeah.
I just pay him to be in the social bucket to talk about all these things. So before we go back to the main topic at hand, how do you like your mashed potatoes?
My favorite is I love Bob Evans Loaded.
Nice.
I like the little chopped up chives and onion and stuff like that.
You like them dirty? You like your dirty mashed potato skins in
Brown
there?
gravy, but yeah, you can leave the skins in.
Okay. Lumpy
What
or
about-
smooth?
Yeah. Do you want your mashed potatoes to be more like pudding?
No,
No.
give me some lumps. I was so in my previous career, I was a manager for Cracker Barrel, and we made a point of making our mashed potatoes homemade. So it was okay if they had a few chunks in them and a little bit of skin in there. You know, gives them some character.
You came
Amen.
prepared, man. You were ready for all of these questions. You don't fit in at all, like Kendall said. All right.
So with we were talking earlier about a lot about the stigma, social stigma of mental health, and one thing that I want to touch on, because this is a problem that I think exists within the church as well. Now, the way I tend to frame such problems with the church is that there's a more specific problem there, and where I think the church sometimes gets a little bit lost in a way that they allow culture to come and drive the church instead of the word. And but so you being a Christian counselor, that is a Christian who is a counselor working for a secular non-Christian, not anti-Christian, but a non-Christian organization. How do you feel about that when it comes to church and their specific issues with stigma? Whereas in the secular world, you hear people say, like, why can't you just choose happy? In the Christian world, that often translates to, why don't you have enough faith? And those kinds of things that we sometimes will hear. Speak to that if you could.
Yeah, that's great, Kendall, because I do have some clients that specifically see me because even though we would call ourselves a secular counseling agency, I advertise that I offer Christian counseling. And in fact, the owner, she also is a seminary graduate as well. So we do have that faith-based part of our practice. But I have and I was thinking about somebody in particular right now that this person is really struggling because her church family is telling her, hey, you're saved, you're a believer in Jesus, you should be filled with joy, not this depression. And it's like, man, you are just damaging this poor person so much. And here's the thing that is really tricky for me, because my thoughts on this is there's some bad theology being taught there, and or maybe not being taught, but at least a culture of bad theology in the church system. And you guys maybe have experienced some of that yourselves. I know I have, where the pastor does a great job of preaching the word and living up to what a pastor should look like, but man, there's some people in there that are just poison. And I think I've seen that with clients, unfortunately, more often than not. And one of the things that I try to reassure clients is the truth of the gospel, and really speak to that could it be that person that maybe is persecuting you or judging you, I wonder what's going on in their life, that's causing this. Because the character of Jesus speaks to me as someone who would never judge somebody with mental illness. And in fact, he said, right, I'm here, it's the sick who need to see a doctor. not the well.
Mhm.
And I was really taken back by someone a few years ago. I spoke at a meeting at a church, and it was for it was telling my story of my alcoholism. And but this was a faith-based meeting. It wasn't Alcoholics Anonymous or anything like that. And I was talking to guys outside, and they're like, yeah, we don't go to AA meetings because we feel like we're being judged. And I was just so offended by that. I'm like, man, you're a representative of Christ. Who needs Christ more? Not the people in this judgmental church, but the people out there, that maybe have never heard the good news, or maybe right now their life is so messed up that their ears are like elephant ears and they're willing to hear what you got to say. So I think that we do our fellow man and woman a disservice by being judgmental and being so focused on, I'm going to only help Christians. No, I don't think that's in the character of Christ.
It's definitely a problem. And I also see it a lot in the prosperity gospel. And for those that aren't familiar, that's like the God is a gumball machine and he exists for your happiness and wealth. And it's a lot of the speak it, see it, right? Where it's like God exists to give you good parking spots and promotions. And I'm not mentioning names. But it's especially true there where it's like, oh, you just, like Kendall said, you didn't have enough faith, or you just need to speak it to go away. And it's like, no, there's like chemical things going on in my biology. Like, so I think, yes, the layer you touched on is absolutely true. There's also that, like, that disconnect for those folks. And it really is a shame because then back to what you very first started with, that keeps you on an island and you feel like you can't reach out to anybody. Or because then it's like double shame because you're living with the shame and guilt of the challenge you're facing, but then the idea that's planted inside your brain that you don't have enough faith. And so you're doing that wrong too. So you're just like, you don't know where to turn.
One of the things I think of, and I'll use the analogy of maybe a friend of yours has a death in the family, and it's so awkward. We don't know what to say, and it's sorry for your loss, but you hear things like, oh, he's in a better place and all that stuff. That's not helpful, and I think the same thing with folks that are dealing with mental illness. It's like if you can't be helpful or productive, don't say anything, or just say, hey, I'm here for you, or I'm sorry you're going through this.
Yep.
It just, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything.
Yeah, there's an account of a blind man in John chapter 3.
Mhm.
Where he was known, his parents were known, and when he approaches Jesus, you have the disciples themselves asking Jesus. Their concern was this weird theological angle that was a belief of the time and still is a belief of many today. That is it his sin or his parents' sin that caused his blindness? That's what they were concerned about. They weren't concerned with the fundamentals of how do we help this guy? They were concerned with that. And Jesus's response to those disciples was, this isn't the result of his sin nor his parents' sin. And then he says, but this is so this is the I forget how he puts it. This is the path by which, like, God is going to get glory.
Right.
And
I
love
that story.
Yeah. You spoke to it right at the beginning of this podcast with your story, saying that that one of the best assets that you have is your experience.
Right.
As deep and lamentful as that experience might be, it is still a wonderful asset. And for a Christian, I think that lamenting things properly is such a good form of worship. And I think that it can also be an amazing God honoring ministry that struggles can bring that out.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I would say, Kendall, is, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, it's a transformation from why God to what God, what will you have me do with this?
Hmm.
Not, poor me, or, why are you punishing me? No, it's what would you have me do with this, Lord?
Yeah.
And that I think is when we can make that transition to that, then man, we are just off and running then.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you God will meet us in that place.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was funny as you were talking about why people might do that. It feels like this combination of maybe some people that are more likely to want to bury things, well-intentioned people, people that are trying to give good advice, they don't know what to say or do. And so I appreciate that perspective, because I think it's even for people that might live outside of any sort of religious background, I think even the last thing you said still holds true. It's why me too, but what can this mean for me? Even if it's not a religious angle for you, I think that's a bit of reframing there. And as you put it earlier, and I think that's a healthy way to start transitioning from the why did this happen to me, or why is this happening to me, to what could this mean for me going forward, or what could this do for me, or what can I learn from it, is maybe a better way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you guys a quick story. So I had mentioned my son, and we were going to a healing prayer thing on a Thursday night, and we had a bunch of elders and a couple pastors in there praying over my son and myself, and a word came to me during that time, and I shared it with everybody, and we were asking God, what's going to happen? What do we need to do? And the thing that just came to me was, your testimony will glorify me.
Hmm.
And I didn't know what was going to happen at that time, but it really, that was when it just kind of shifted for me, where I could say, okay, I can reframe that thought to, yeah, this is incredibly difficult. But God's got a plan, and my testimony will glorify him. And in the end, it doesn't get much better than that.
It's always been helpful for me to have this sort of mental image of stepping stones across a creek. And like, I may not be across the creek, but I may be one stepping stone ahead of you based on my experience. And if I can pull you along to the next stone, like people always say, I can't imagine losing a child. I would never be able to get through that. And here you are, and you're saying you can, and let me show you how I did. And people always say that until they lose a child. I've got a lot of friends that have, and they're like, I didn't think I could either. And you're never over it, and it never goes away. But I'm a little further across that creek, and I can help somebody who's facing that for the first time, thinking there's no way in hell I'll be able to get through this nightmare. And then there's you going, let me pull you to the next stone.
Right. Because I know God pulled me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or somebody else, or if it's
somebody else.
Yeah. Or if it's alcoholism, or if it's pornography, or if it's like whatever you're trying to like get through, it's like, hey, there is a path, and here's what helped me. Maybe it'll help you. And that, again, to Dylan's point, that can be religious or not religious. It's somebody that's a stepping stone ahead of you, and you just need that example.
Right.
You just need some tangible like image of somebody who is in the process of doing it.
But I think the one thing that at least in my experience, Corey, is being able to have the humility to put your hands up and say, I can't do this by myself.
Yeah.
And And I would encourage anyone out there that is remotely feeling depressed or anxious or whatever you're going through, it's okay to put your hands up and say, I need help. We are meant to be in community. We're not meant to bear these burdens by ourselves.
That might be a segue to something that I was curious about. So I think in all communities, there's a lot of discussion frequently around um, uh, natural remedies to things versus maybe somebody being prescribed something. So in regards to this can be as high level as you want, because this is going to be broad. In regards to things like anxiety, depression, there's a lot of that discussion, CBD products, supplements, vitamins, things like that versus prescription drugs. There's good, bad, I think, to both. As we all know, a lot of people get sold on natural remedies, but those are also multi-billion-dollar industries that are trying to make money. There might be some good out there. There's a lot of good to prescription drugs, but there might be some hesitancy there. So how do you advise somebody who's like, I'm just trying to find what they perceive as the most natural path to get help? Maybe not so much in talking to somebody versus knowing when it's time to like, okay, I'm teetering over to where I need to seriously seek some sort of prescription or something to help.
Right. And usually in that case, obviously I would refer them to a psychiatrist. They're the best equipped to handle that kind of stuff. And the reason I say that is, your family physician could easily prescribe you those kind of medications, but a psychiatrist is specifically trained to they handle those kind of things, and they would have the best training, the best knowledge about each one of these drugs. Where not to dismiss any doctor, but maybe not so much your family physician. So, usually what I do is I may recommend someone to see a psychiatrist if I feel like we're not making any progress in our therapy sessions. If your anxiety is so bad that, and we go through some techniques and some interventions, and you just can't get to do them, you can't get yourself to do them throughout the week, then maybe we should talk about it a little bit. And I think that there's certain things too that probably warrant medication. Yeah, I would definitely say bipolar disorder would be the top of the list. Mania can be very dangerous, and you certainly do not want to. If somebody is diagnosed bipolar, they get to that manic state, that is not a good place for them to be, or their family or anybody around them. And also, I see a lot of clients with OCD. Typically, it's good to have maybe some medication management, at least in the beginning of therapy, just to kind of settle it down a little bit till they can learn some interventions before eventually they can get off the medication. But I think a psychiatrist as well would also recommend therapy along with the medication. I don't think anybody really suggests that medication is going to be the solution for the lifetime.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's just establishing like, I'm sure there are people in the world like me that need some sort of order of operations. Like I talked to my family doctor. They didn't really tell me a whole lot. They were kind of vague. So I think even giving people a sense of like, maybe it's time to reach out to a counselor or a therapist, let them try to work with you a little bit. Then I think maybe a next step after that would be, if it's severe, to talk to a psychiatrist. So I think even people kind of knowing maybe if they are willing to bring it up to their family doctor, but if their family doctor is kind of vague about, what next steps might be, because we've all had that. We've asked the doctor something before and they're like,
Yeah.
You could maybe try this. If that doesn't
Mhm.
seem, then just let me know, in a year when I see you again.
Right.
And sometimes it's like, that doesn't, okay, I guess. So I think that's good. I mean, I think it gives people an idea of, okay, talk to so-and-so, talk to, I think that's great. And so I
Yeah.
appreciate that, because I totally respect the desire to want to do things like what you talked about before our break. You can have
Mhm.
some mental exercises, some physical things. And so I think it's good to have some things you can work on your own that might help you naturally work through the variety of things that come up.
Right. I think a lot of these things, that you can at least get manageable without medication. And I would encourage anyone to try that. I think that, there's obviously any medication you take, there's side effects that come with it. Typically, if you're on it for a long time, you may have to increase the dosage as time goes on. And I can tell you, even the non-addictive stuff, what they call the SSRIs, which release serotonin in your body, the serotonin inhibitors anyway, they are bears to come off of. Like typically, people have a real, severe dip in mood or heightened anxiety when they come off. So even though the person may say, well, these aren't addictive, there still are side effects that, and you hear a lot of, some cause weight gain, some uh, really can make your mood even worse, or you turn into like really angry, things like that. So I think and that's why I say, the psychiatrist would be way better, because they will follow up with you, every 2 weeks to a month, and really get that work with you, focusing on that
Yeah.
medication.
Yeah, and I think just to be really clear on that point is what you're not saying is avoid the medication. You're not
Right.
feeding into a stigma against medication. Even what you're saying is talk to somebody who can manage that medication.
Yeah.
well.
Absolutely.
Order of operations. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I said psychiatry. I would go with that every time. And really, my position is, I mean, I'm familiar with some pharmacology stuff, obviously, but I'm no expert. So, I would tell my clients 100% of the time, hey, I've got a psychiatrist that I can refer you to. Um, I can get you in, schedule an appointment, and talk to a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner who is way more qualified
Yeah,
than I am to talk about medication.
yeah, because the science on that is, I mean, as much as society is learning, and I believe getting better at at recognizing mental illness as a medical problem. Um, the science is also changing and evolving as we learn more and more. And so having someone like a psychiatrist, like this is a highly specialized field,
Absolutely.
and having someone who's closest to all of those changes and evolutions of the medicine end of it is just a really smart thing.
It is, because look, these guys have to go to med school, right? And they're making the decision to be psychiatrists. So these people are passionate about what they do, in my mind. Because look, if you're going to med school, why not be a heart surgeon or something where you could make a gazillion dollars? You're going to have the same student debt. So, I really have a lot of respect for the folks in the psychiatry business.
So one thing I wanted to ask, we talk all kinds of media on our podcast. Obviously, a lot of it can be fun, but we talk movies, music, shows, podcasts. What are some of the best pieces of media you point to within the mental health field? Any specials, documentaries, podcasts that you like? Anything that you steer people to just for general learning or specific? It can be specific content for specific things people are dealing with.
Well, I'll throw out two to you guys right now that I really like. Now, in a general sense, I will mention TED Talks. There's a lot of really good TED Talks on mental illness, mental health, and I find a lot of them helpful, especially with clients. But as far as education goes, um, a group called Med Circle is the first one. They have some of the top-notch people in the United States who are all PhD level, either psychologists, psychiatrists. They talk about a lot of different types of mental illness. And they also talk about the medication end, the therapy end, and things like that. But it's really designed, I think, more for a higher level of information. It's not your, basic, this is what depression is kind of thing. It really gets in depth. So for me as a therapist, I really enjoy watching those. The other one is a lady by the name of Dr. Tracy Marks. And we watch a lot of her videos in our group supervision at our agency. She is a psychiatrist as well, but she does a lot of videos and talks on a different variety of mental health issues. And again, she'll talk about the medication management, but she also offers a lot of good tips for people. We watched one recently, and she was speaking about bipolar disorder, and she was talking about tips to manage mania. And I thought it was really interesting because there was definitely some things that I hadn't thought of that, kind of that idea of getting ahead of the game. It's like, okay, if I, do these kind of activities, and it was like, wearing blue blocker glasses after 7 o'clock, and just, sleep hygiene things, very useful tools that anybody could pick up on and easily use.
Are those YouTube resources? Can people
Yes,
find those on YouTube?
on YouTube. Now, Med Circle, Tracy Marks does videos every week. Med Circle has a lot of their videos. They also have a website. There's a lot of stuff on there that you can only access off the website, but a lot of it's like, conference stuff and things like that only a real counseling enthusiast would be geeked out about that.
It's an industry resource.
Yes, definitely. But some of the YouTube stuff is I think more useful for the everyday folks. And there's a couple therapists on YouTube as well, that one by the name of Katie Morton. She does a lot of videos. She does a really good job explaining stuff for the the everyday folks. So she would be somebody I'd recommend as well.
Well, thank you for those resources. In regards to, you were saying a lot of good tips. Here's a question. So last 14 months, I've kind of joked when I've said this to family, the last 14 or 15 months, at best, it's been a pretty stressful time. And at worst, it's been a lot worse for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
After the last 14, 15 months, what are some of the things people should be looking for in themselves and others to know if there's potentially new things they need to be working through with everything going on?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were just talking about this today within our practice, because they had, came out with the new mask mandate. It's like, hey, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. And they moved it up from the June 2nd thing. So, at first we're just like, oh, all excited, but then we just found ourselves wearing masks still. It's like we're so conditioned now. But I think that one of the things that I would tell people is understand that it's been 14 months, so we need to transition back into maybe some of those old routines that you did. You don't have to do everything at once. Take it easy on yourself. So going back to that kind of that wellness stuff, it's like, we can't go back to, all of a sudden now it's May of 2019. You know, things have changed, things are different. And I would tell people, you know, I think the biggest thing for people is going to be, are they going to be able to feel safe and comfortable going back into kind of a more so-called normal life? And this is where we're kind of concerned, is some of these lingering effects of the 14 months. And that's why I alluded to the mask thing. You know, what other kinds of things we conditioned ourselves to do? You know, are there some bad habits we picked up? I can tell you for myself, and I know a lot of people, we might have put on a few extra pounds in the last 14 months, you know, those kind of things, you know. So maybe being a little bit more mindful of, okay, now it's not, I don't have to isolate and, you know, watch Netflix or Disney Plus all day. I can actually get out and do some stuff. So
Okay, well, it's been fun, Patrick. All right. Okay, this has been fun.
Your wellness plan, Dylan. I want to see it.
I'm
was hearing,
I'm
I was hearing
notes.
stuff I wanted to hear up until now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, but I think that that's, thank you, because I think that's good. Keeping an eye on your own habits now and new habits, and what do those transitions look like, and also for your loved ones and your friends. I mean, I think that's a great point.
Right. Yeah, and again, I don't think my fear for a lot of people is they're going to try to cram everything into, you know, like just snap a finger, and it's not going to be like that, you know. So obviously there's being mindful of maybe some bad habits, but also being kind to yourself as well.
And how would you, in light of all of that, if somebody knew somebody who they thought was struggling with some kind of mental illness, how would you go about approaching that friend or loved one, with the idea that you think maybe they could use some help, and maybe this friend is somebody who you're afraid of would push back on that? Maybe it'll be a surprise to them that somebody thinks they have a mental illness. Maybe they're self-stigmatizing the whole idea. They might be resistant to that type of news. How would you approach a friend?
Whew, that's a tough one.
You guys, I already talked to Patrick, okay? Gosh.
You know, one thing I would say with this, Kendall, is, look, if you're a good friend, you're going to say something. I tell people that I'm friends with all the time, call me out on my stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't say anything to me, that tells me you don't care. You know, so I think being able to be authentic with our friends is the first thing. So, you know, maybe we can, you know, I would use a little therapy on you, Kendall. I'd say, you know, do you know for sure that person's going to react badly? You know, what evidence do you have for that? You know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And, you know, I would probably position it, hey, I really care about you. I really think a lot about you, but this is what I'm seeing. And be able to give specific, concrete examples. Right. If I go to somebody and say, hey, I think you're depressed, and then that's it. But I'm going to say, hey, look, I've noticed, you know, you haven't been coming to coffee on Thursdays with us anymore. What's up with that? Or I haven't seen you every week at church. You know, I haven't seen you for a month. You haven't been responding to texts. What's going on with you? You know, be able to have some concrete examples. Now, obviously, if somebody's going to be, you may not get the response you want, but again, I think it's if it's a friendship worth having, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, what I like in there is there's language that we've heard other places. you're not coming in hot with accusatory language, right?
Yes.
Versus you're giving examples because you're seeking to understand. You're trying to understand what's been going on with them, how they're feeling, versus saying you're doing this wrong. You're saying, hey, I've noticed this. Can you tell me what's going on, or is anything going on? And so I think that language is much more compassionate and understanding as you're approaching that person. So I think that gives people an idea of what they can say and how they can phrase it to maybe not come across like immediately out of the gates.
Yeah.
You know?
And one thing I would say too is I've been able, I've been to counseling in my lifetime as well. And I would have no problem telling somebody that, hey, I've gone through some stuff and I've seen somebody and it really helped me. And again, kind of normalizing it a little bit, but definitely coming at it from more of that understanding side and non-confrontational and in stigmatizing and judging and things like that. It's like, hey, look, we go through stuff, and I have too. And I really think the world of you, and I'd love for you to maybe call somebody.
That's great. And I like what you said there. I forget who I was listening to. I think it was last week, but they were saying, we all love to brag when we go to the gym and we work on those muscles. But the minute somebody brings up, I'm going to go work on my emotional muscles, we get all freaked out. And it should be as cool or in vogue to be saying, hey, I'm working on my emotional muscles too, And so I think even for me, and we've done over 100 episodes, I've casually mentioned it in conversation a couple of times now, but that feels therapeutic to just be like, yeah, I talked to somebody and it's really helpful. Like not that I've been like practicing it or like trying to get over my own stigma of it, but I feel like just being more open about it just helps me anyway. And back to the stepping stone analogy, if for one person that I know or that knows me, they feel like, oh, okay, well, he's talking about it pretty normally in conversation, maybe that's something that I could check out. So Patrick, this has been like so helpful, man. And I know that this is going to be a really good resource to people. There's been so many helpful nuggets in here. Open Arms is already slammed. You guys got 3 times the business, but what would you recommend for you've kind of already mentioned it with Dylan and Kendall's last 2 questions, but like, how could people reach out? Are there numbers, like whether they're in Central Ohio or not? What are some good next steps?
Absolutely. So I would encourage anybody to visit our website, openarmscounseling.com. We are located downtown Columbus. We are doing telehealth though right now. So anybody throughout Ohio, we could have counseling sessions with. Oh, I was like, what the heck's going on? There's our website. Hey, damn technology. But yeah, you can meet the team there and see everybody's wonderful picture. It's great. You can schedule an appointment through the website. You can also give us a call, 614-625-7183. Get you in with the next available therapist. I actually have another therapist starting tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon. So
awesome.
She'll be looking for clients. So let's book her up. I think one of the things we do as well, if we feel like, for whatever reason, maybe we can't serve your immediate needs, we definitely have other agencies that we refer people out to as well that we feel comfortable with, whether it be former therapists that we've worked with in the past, former interns, or different agencies. Some people need a higher level of care initially. So especially with the depression, if it's suicidal ideation, things like that.
What about people not in the Central Ohio area? I know there's a lot of resources now, like a lot of the comics I listen to, their podcasts, they promote this BetterHelp. I don't know if there's anything to that. Are there any national hotlines that you find credible or trustworthy?
Well, psychology today is probably the best website that you can go to find a therapist in your area. It's a nationwide website. You can look specifically by zip code. You can look specifically by which insurance they take, their theoretical approach, a specific issue that you're wanting to deal with, and they'll narrow that search down for you. So
Awesome.
most people who are in our profession do rent space on that website.
Awesome. Dylan, Kendall, anything from you?
Well,
That's
thank
it.
you so much, man.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Patrick.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it. And share this episode if you have a friend or family member that you think would benefit from any of the conversation we've had here tonight. Really just grateful for not only, Patrick and I's regular sessions, but his time tonight. And really excited about having him, and just know that this will be valuable to people. So thanks again, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Bye.